Hi YouTube, I have the new Canon R6 mirrorless digital camera along with the Canon 70-200 f2.8 RF lens. And I'm going to be using this for sports photography only. I'm not going to be taking videos, nothing else. Primarily mountain bikers, sometimes runners. Prior to getting this camera, I have been using my Canon 7D with a 70-200 f2.8 lens. Prior to that, I used the Canon 70D, same lens, 70-200 f2.8. The only big difference is it's got a flip-out screen, and the 7D has better low-light performance. This has much better low-light performance. So I was blown away by the reviews that I saw online about how great the autofocus on the R6 was. So when I get in the woods and I'm photographing mountain bikers who have full-face helmets, goggles, the face detection does not work all that well. And the focusing was actually pretty bad. So I experimented with the focusing systems on this, the face detection, the single point, the little 4 points, expanded area with like 9 points, and then a wider area and the horizontal and vertical areas. I didn't find anything better than using a single point, which is what I used with this. When I was experimenting with this, it was at a practice enduro race. And I took 2,500 pictures, and about 67% of them were in focus, which is kind of disappointing. When I switched this to a single point, and when I have it oriented vertically, I use a point a little higher up towards the face or chest of the rider. And when I have it oriented this way, I still use a point a little higher up. When I took runners at a running race, I used the face detection, and it worked quite well. A very large percentage of my pictures were in focus. When I did the enduro, using a single point, took 2,500 pictures and about 78% were in focus. For mountain bikers with helmets, and especially goggles and full face helmets, the face detection is not that good. And I kind of was hoping it would be that good, because I was hoping maybe speed skaters or other sports that use helmets would have been factored into the face detection autofocus of this camera. On my 7D, I do not have a touchscreen. The very first time I went to use this camera was at a triathlon, and I had gotten it the day before. I'm used to looking at the back of the screen to determine how my exposure is and how the picture came out. Because I use my left eye, my nose, if I flip this around and put it there, my nose sometimes will touch the screen and change the focus point. So what I was doing the first time I used the camera was I would take some pictures, I would open the screen, kind of play them back, delete the ones that weren't in focus, flip the screen back, and if somehow I was managing to touch the left-hand side of the screen and change my focus point. So the only thing that was in focus was the guy on the left-hand side of, say, a pack of bikers. And I struggled with that for a while before I realized what I was doing, and then I closed the screen, never used it again during the entire shoot. And I haven't used the screen for any of the shooting that I've done lately. When I was taking pictures of mountain bikers the very first day, it seems like there's a lag. This is an optical viewfinder, this is an electronic viewfinder. There's no lag in the optical viewfinder here, but I swear there's a lag, and there is the blackout. And I was having trouble tracking mountain bikers. I've gotten used to that, but initially I had a little bit of trouble with that. Also, when you're looking through this screen, there is kind of a bluish tint to what you see. And it's not exactly what you see here. However, the good thing with this is what you see in the viewfinder, if you're changing your exposure levels, is exactly going to match your exposure, whereas on one of these with DSLRs with the optical viewfinder, you have no idea what that picture looked like. Here, you know exactly what that picture is going to look like when you take the picture, and you can adjust your exposure to accommodate that, which is nice. It's a huge improvement over these. Sometimes you take a picture, it'd be too dark, increase your ISO, take another picture, it'd be too light. That's another thing. I always shoot in manual mode. This has a brand new mode called FV, which is like manual mode, but it's also like, can be as automatic as you want. You can set your shutter speed to be auto, You can set your aperture to be auto, you can set your ISO to be auto, or any combination of those be manual. It's like having TV, AV, and manual all on one setting of your dial. And you change which of those items you want to modify. Like say you want to do the shutter speed, you would rotate this till the shutter speed is lit up, and then you'd rotate this dial to change the shutter speed. You could rotate this, change the aperture, rotate this again, change the ISO. Now what's really cool is I like to shoot at about 1/1000th of a second, f2.8, and choose my ISO appropriately, but what this camera lets you do in that FV mode is use 1/1000, f2.8, and an automatic ISO, which should be good, but I'm still finding in practice the metering, so spot metering works pretty good, and it's probably my favorite, but it doesn't always work. If somebody's got a bright white shirt and it gets the exposure off that white shirt, everything's going to be too dark. If you use the, I don't remember what it's called, some kind of adaptive area where it kind of takes in the whole scene, that works great if it's all kind of dark woods, but it doesn't work great if you have sunlight in the background and subjects in a shadow area. Although I kind of want to use the automatic ISO, in practice it wasn't working out that well and I had to go back to manual mode. But I didn't actually have to switch the dial back. I just could use the FV mode and set every single one of the three things to manual. These two cameras are crop sensor cameras. So your sensor is smaller and it multiplies everything by 1.4. This is 70 to 200. Because this is a crop sensor, this is more like 100 to 280 for a zoom. And the lack of reach of this was really noticeable. I was doing that triathlon, and the day before I had gone out and shot some pictures with this camera, with its crop sensor, and I could stand on the beach and get canoers going by a specific buoy, and the full 18.5-foot long canoe would take up most of the frame. With the non-crop sensor camera, the canoe didn't take up nearly the whole frame. I really needed to get closer, but I couldn't. The lack of reach is definitely noticeable. The battery life of this I was really worried about, because I will go to an enduro and I'll spend from 8 in the morning till maybe 3:30 in the afternoon taking 2,500 pictures with this camera. I'll have to change the battery, but not till pretty late in the day. This camera I was really worried about because it's all electronic. The tips I got were to turn it off in between shooting, and I also have Wi-Fi off. I have the viewfinder in a battery saver mode, so it shuts off rather quickly. I was able to take a whole day's worth of pictures without any trouble whatsoever, and only the last few pictures I had to change the battery. And the really good thing is, the battery that comes with this, I guess, is more powerful than the batteries that come with this camera. However, the old batteries will work in the new camera. That is huge. So this camera has a much higher ISO than the 7D, which has a much higher ISO, max ISO, than the 70D. I have found that the 70D doesn't get too grainy up to maybe 6400 ISO. The 7D can double that, 12,800 ISO, without getting too grainy. This camera can go to at least 32,000, maybe 40,000 ISO, so I can use it in much lower light. The woods where I take pictures are always dark. So there's really only two issues that I've had with this camera, which I've already mentioned, was the autofocus face detection doesn't work that well with full face helmets and goggles. The second, and this one really is irritating, is the frames per second on this is way too fast. I get a zillion pictures that are all the same. This camera was perfect, this camera was good, and I'm going to show you the difference in speeds. Okay, I'm going to try to take some pictures with each of these cameras in their high-speed shooting modes. First one's going to be the 70D. If I hit the Q button and go to here, I always use this camera in high-speed continuous. And if I take a picture, that's not too bad for sports photography. If I go over to the 7D high-speed, this is what it sounds like. That's actually a bit too fast. So what I actually end up doing with this camera is putting this into low speed continuous shooting, and that's pretty ideal. You don't get a million pictures of the same thing. This camera is the R6, hit the Q button. So if I choose High Speed Plus uses, I think, the electronic shutter and is wicked fast. So it just took a million pictures. If I go to High Speed Continuous, here's what it sounds like. This is using the mechanical shutter, I believe. That's still too fast. If I go to Low Speed Continuous, here's what it is. That's way too slow. So I don't have anything in between. I don't have a medium fast. I have kind of too fast or too slow. Now another thing with the autofocus, right now I have it on face tracking because I was shooting a running race yesterday. Go up to that and choose spot. Not the little spot, but the bigger spot. These are the other ones, expanded area and expanded AF area. I would use one of those three right there. And I wouldn't use that one, and I wouldn't use that one, and I wouldn't use that one. None of those worked all that well. Face detection and auto tracking worked really well for the running race, but it does not work well in the woods for mountain biking. So I don't use the tiny little spot. I use the expanded, bigger 1-point autofocus. And I have it set up so that I have different autofocus points for vertical and horizontal. For vertical, I usually bring it up into this range. Horizontal, I use it right about there. And that works out well for photographing mountain bikers. One other thing in the autofocus menu is what type of shooting you're doing. And the case one is versatile multi-purpose, which I tried and it worked okay, not great. Then there was continue to track subjects ignoring possible obstacles. Say a mountain biker goes behind a tree and comes out. I generally don't set myself up so that people are going behind trees, so that's not an issue. But then I was in a situation where I was photographing people coming into view at the last minute, and I focused on a tree real close to them, and I used case 3, which instantly focuses on subjects suddenly entering autofocus points, and it didn't work very well. I focused on the tree, which was right next to where the person came into focus, so as soon as the person came into the spot, the first 2 pictures would be out of focus, and then they would pick up the subject and follow him. I saw somebody's recommendation online that I should try case A, which is track automatically, so it chooses between these different modes, and I'm going to try that the next time I take pictures. So on both of the older lenses, the zoom was here, 70, 200. It's a very small distance from the camera to the ring. I was very used to that. On the RF lens, the zoom ring is here, 70 to 200. And it seems to be more of a rotation of my hand. I'm going to try this from here, 70, and I get a little shy of 200 and I have to arc over a little bit. So it seems to be taking more rotation of your hand to go from 70 to 200. Let me try that on this one. So here's 70, 200. Seems to be less of a rotation. So that's another thing that's not good with this. And it took me quite a while to get used to not reaching for this ring to zoom in and out when I had to reach for this one. One thing that is not a problem, I didn't think I would like the way the lens zooms in and out like that. You don't even notice it. Another thing is this lens has a lock switch, which if I bring it all the way in, I can lock it and it won't accidentally move out. Okay, another advantage of this camera is when you hit playback, if you don't have the viewfinder open, it'll play back through the electronic viewfinder. Whereas these, when you hit playback your pictures only here. What I like a lot, since I'm actually never using the screen anymore, is I can hit play and everything in there looks crystal clear to me. And I'm old and I need glasses to see close up, so I find using the LCD screen is a little bit difficult, but using the viewfinder on the R6 is way easier. And another thing is I can go into FV mode and change all my settings right there. on that screen using this dial and this dial. The R6 has dual SD card slots. You can put 2 memory cards in your camera and it will write to both of them simultaneously, and one will be the backup for the other. If you go through your photos and delete the bad ones only delete off 1 memory card, which is kind of cool if you make a mistake. And the 70D weighs 4 pounds, 14.4 ounces. The 70 weighs 5 pounds, 5.6 ounces. And the new R6 weighs 3 pounds, 15.2 ounces. In addition to the weight savings, there's also the size savings stored away. That's how small that camera is, whereas this one takes up considerably more room, at least 3 or 4 inches in your pack. Okay, one thing with these lens hoods is this particular one has some kind of a trap door here, which is constantly getting opened up when I have the camera around my neck and it catches on my clothing. So I don't like that. I don't know why that's there. Okay, we just looked up what this little door here is for, and I guess if you have a polarizing filter, you can reach your finger in here and twist it around. So in summary, I was really hoping the R6 would be way better at autofocusing on mountain bikers than it is. I was also not aware that the rapid fire shutter speed would be quite the issue that I'm experiencing. The other 2 cameras are absolutely fine. The big advantage to this one is the higher ISO and face detection for runners, but not so much for bikers. The crop sensor has really reduced the reach of this camera compared to these 2 cameras. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching. I made this video because I hadn't seen anybody make a video discussing how well or not so well this camera and lens worked when photographing people with helmets on, especially full face helmets. So, would I have bought this camera had I watched somebody's video like mine? Maybe not, because it was a significant investment. It was something like $5,500, I think, including tax. I couldn't order this lens from B&H Photo, but I was able to order the camera from B&H Photo. So I saved the tax using my Paybu card, but I didn't save the tax when I ordered the lens direct from Canon. But I did get free shipping. Called them up and asked them if there was a coupon code for any kind of discount, and they gave me free shipping. So there's that. Thanks for watching.